My guest today is Dr. Jeremy Ciano, and he founded Revolutionize in Indiana, and he's here to talk with us today about his journey and his experience. Dr. Jeremy, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you bet. So we were just having a little pre-show chat, and we were talking a little about your practices overall. I mean, so just for the listeners, you've had two practices under the Revolutionize for over 10 years, and we can talk about those and how those are doing a little bit. But you also have two brand new practices that you tried to do something a little bit different with coming into those two startups. Can you tell us a little bit about that and what you did?
Yeah, so we've got an adult clinic called Revolutionize where we specialize in contact lenses and high-end fashion with the adults. And then we did a spin-off about 10 years ago for Little Eyes, which is precursor. We're doing a lot of games and fun stuff with the kids, and that's been really cool. And so Revolution's been open for almost 20 years. Little Eyes has been open for about 10. And then last year we opened up two new practices of each. And we've been doing profit first in our main companies for the last 5 years. And I've always said it's changed my life. I can't tell friends and family members enough about it. And I've always said, I wish I would have done it sooner. I wish I would have done this when we were just getting started off and really put my money where my mouth is with, especially when you don't have any cash flow with a brand new business. And, you preach that, but then when you have to live it, it's a different ballgame. So from day one, put my money where my mouth was, and I followed the protocol and said, okay, we really had no idea what our cash flow was going to be, but I knew we had to start somewhere. So we made a certain amount of, guesstimates based off of our pro forma in both locations, the Little Eyes and the Revolutionize, which have completely different cash flow systems. And I said, we're just going to start chunking away into our profit first subcategories and our different bank accounts. And then as things grow, we're going to have a much more rapid allocation change as we are changing our cash flow model. But we're not going to wait for us to be out of debt, profitable before we start the right process.
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. So as you're putting that system of profit first into play in your, whether it's the new ones or there's probably a different perspective. Well, there is going to be a little bit different perspective for each, but just kind of talk about like what types of things, because I always talk about, profit first as being is another, I mean, it serves a couple of things. So I should back up for a sec, right? It's a real-time cash flow, like feedback loop, right? So you've got that piece that's working. But it's also, there's an analysis component to it that any kind of financial analysis is, so like the means to the end, right? It tells you where you need to look and what shifts you need to make, but it's not going to do it for you. So as you were putting that into, like, what new things did you learn about either the existing practices or as you were building up these new ones that allowed you to shift because you had profit first in play and you could see kind of the issues dwelling in there? I mean, a lot of people think it's simply I got to outpace my revenue, and it is to a certain extent, but they get into that mode for a long term, right? Where there could be other things that are happening. Did you find anything like that? Other things that were happening in there?
I mean, when you're doing startup business, your cash flow is up and down, and you're really hoping and praying because there's no consistency. The weirdest thing and the great thing with the profit first was with the established practices. What I did, our modification is we take our quarterly estimates from our accountants and we take a weekly draw. That's the way that we get our profit first allocations set, just because we do so many transactions, you can't take a percentage. So with our taxes changing dramatically with all of the write-offs and discounts of construction and building new buildings, our quarterly taxes changed obviously dramatically, but I kept the same allocations, which was great. So our tax bucket has grown dramatically.
For sure.
Also knowing that in the next 2 years, when that kicks back in and all these deductions from the growth come out, I'm still going to need all that surplus to pay extra taxes. So that was one of the good benefits. And of course, at the end of each quarter, we're having a little bit of a pleasant surprise with the established practices. With the new ones, again, we're trying to hit certain targets on more of a quarterly basis than we are on a weekly, because we just don't have the proper allocations, and it's just way too dynamic right now. But having that in place and the team knowing from a financial standpoint that we have to put into the buckets every single week is a big deal. And then we're changing them as we're starting to grow.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So, and you guys, you have, how many doctors do you have working for you? Like
Right now we're at 7 doctors,
okay.
4
All right.
locations.
Yeah. Very good. How, when we work with we work with a bunch of optometrists in different stages as well. And it's always just interesting to hear a perspective of like, when it came time to, like, when it comes time to bring on new doctors, right? There's always a conversation we're having, especially with folks who are say single owners, single operators at the moment. So they're the only doctor in their space. Is that something that you set out right away when you were like when you first started the 2 initial practices, that you knew that you were going to build it to a multi-location, several doctor practice, or
Yeah, I
how did
always
that come
wanted
about?
to, I wanted to be a business owner as
Yeah.
well as a medical professional, but I knew that was going to be a long-term path. Really, yeah, the first year when we opened up cold, it was just me. I was there for 6 days a week, hoping and praying for the best. And I got to my breaking point after the first year, and I knew that realistically I would never make it grinding that hard. So I made a real tough decision in year 2. I actually hired a doctor to work 2 days a week when I could not afford to hire a doctor in the clinic.
Okay.
But what I did to offset that is actually the 2 days a week that she came in, I started freelancing at every other optical chain you can imagine. And the money I collected from these optical chains was going directly to the other doctor. It was a net financial wash for that entire year, but I also knew that eventually she would build up her books, and that would be my foothold to start working on the business instead of in the business. Um,
Okay.
it was a tough, I still remember psychologically, that was a real tough year. I had a brand new practice and I was driving an hour to go to mega box chain stores with crappy equipment.
Mm,
But I knew what I had to do for my family. And 20 years later, that doctor is still with us, and it was easily the best thing I've ever done.
nice. Very cool.
Yeah.
So, all right, very good. So, I did want to pass up on the opportunity to talk a little bit more about you were mentioning profit first again and the cash flow, and you were had mentioned that you were using it at home in a somewhat unique way as well. Tell us a little bit more about that, because I'm
Yeah,
interested to
so
hear.
we've got 4 kids, but we've got 2 teenagers that were right around the driving age or pre-driving age. And so we started the Profit First with them on a couple different categories, with a financial savings for them. They all have part-time jobs, but we wanted them to have a car fund. We wanted them to have a car repair fund, and then also a college/investment account. And I kind of did a hybrid of the Profit First book, but also there's a real tiny pamphlet book called The Richest Man in Babylon. And
Mhm.
it talks about, the 2 most important things is you always have to put some of your gold away. And then rule number 2, it's most important, is make your gold work for you. So we actually open up for all 4 of our kids. We call them their Babylon accounts. And
Okay.
so whenever they get Christmas money or birthday money, or the older kids who are working, they have to allocate at least 20% immediately into their Babylon accounts. And then what I do is I pay them 1% every month of what's in that account as their gold growth, because
Mhm.
they can count 1%, especially when they're little. And it's
Yeah.
amazing to see on Christmas morning when they'll get cash from their grandparents and they'll hand me the things and put this in my Babylon account. And in a few short years, the kids have saved up, and I'm really proud. My 2 oldest have actually bought their own cars, and they pay for their own gas. They've got their repair fund. And when we had to get tires for the oldest last year, it was essentially taken care of. And he finally looked at me. He's like, I was so pissed at you all these years, and now thank you. So I
Yeah.
thought that was pretty cool. And then the leftovers, they're going to be able to take to college. But because we pay them that 1% dividend every month, they're more reluctant to take it out because they also know
Right.
that they're going to be losing in on that free interest.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's awesome. Well, it's great to see it, and it's got to be a great feeling as a parent. I mean, we have 5 kids ourselves. It's got to be a great feeling to have that when it comes full circle, right? Where they're like, "I hate you, I hate you, I hate you. This was the best thing you ever did for me."
You're
Like
not
that
parenting well
lesson,
if you don't
right?
get that speech, right?
Yeah, exactly. I think we all got to get it at some point. Oh, that's awesome. So, well, thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I mean, we're always advocates, even for to a certain extent. It's just like profit first in your business, right? You've already mentioned it. Like, not everybody implements it by the book. I mean, I've been doing implementations of it for 13, 14 years, and nobody has ever yet done it 100% by the book, right? So it's a framework there, and you utilize it, and you overlay it with what you've got going on, and you find out, you modify it and find out where it works for you. And we advocate for the same thing at home to an extent, right? Because at home, it's, at the end of the day, this is like the envelope system using bank accounts instead of envelopes, right? So but it's a great way still if you have, like, if you need that framework or want to see it in your personal finances in a different light, you can overlay that same analysis and do it. And at the very least, like you said, teach some good lessons to some young ones along the way. So sounds like it really paid off. Hey, I don't know if you ever done this, but you had mentioned before that you would wish you had done started profit first right away when you started the first couple of practices when you first started your very first one.
Mhm.
Have you ever done so? I've been on the speaking circuit before with Dr. Mick Kling, and he puts it in his presentation because he says the same thing. It's like, man, I wish I'd done this right away. And he actually went back and like recalculated, what if I did that? Like, what would my profit account? How much more like
Yeah.
profit distributions would I have had personally? It was a staggering number. I don't know. It might make you sick to do it, but have you ever done it before? Or have you started just for that reason?
Yeah, I think that would scare me. That's
Yeah.
I don't think I want to learn that number.
He's doing it to get across a point in a seminar, right, or in a
Right.
speech. So probably makes sense. Yeah, I don't think I would do it either. Like, because I was in business for a while before I found profit first too, and I'm like, that might, like, we don't have to live in the past too
Well,
much.
the
But
crazy thing, and like when I do seminars or I've got some think tanks that I'm a part of, and I try to explain to people, it's the envelope system, and in real high level conversation.
Mhm.
And what everybody says is, yeah, I got it, I got it. And I said, you know what? I had it too. I was pretty disciplined. I knew what I was doing. I did it for 10 years. I was okay until I actually did it, and it changed
Mhm.
my life. And I'm like, guys, girls, I know you got this, but you don't got it until you start doing it. And once you do, it becomes so easy and such a your routine, and to blow it over, because the concepts are basic, but it's the implementation of that foundational education that we never do. And once
Mhm.
you put it into place, it's impossible to get off that freight train.
Yeah, right. It becomes addicting. I mean, the new way of doing it, and you're just seeing so much success with it. Like, how could you stray away from it after that? But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, we run into that quite a bit too, like a healthy amount of pushback or resistance. And I don't know if it's, I mean, there's a variety of things, of course, but sometimes I think it's, you know, putting it into play doesn't mean what you were doing before was necessarily wrong, right? I
Right.
think that's a big thing for people to understand too about it, is that, yeah, you obviously weren't doing things wrong if you're an established practice and you're still around and you're still paying yourself and still surviving, right? So it went, and even if you're still profitable and growing and reinvesting in the business, there's all those things that profit first would allow you to do if you weren't doing it already. But even if you are doing those things, like, it's an enhanced, it provides that enhanced way of looking at it where you can really maximize your opportunities then, right?
Right. And then
That,
the other, and I would over caution, this is the mistake I made on the flip side when we just opened up these new practices. Or I also acquired a practice a couple months ago, and the instantaneous cash flow surplus of bringing in another doctor and the patients, I was like, whoa, this is great. And I let it sit for about a month to see what our guesstimate was. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to start pulling this out. And as we know, sometimes in the beginning, in the honeymoon phase, it can be a lot more successful than what reality checks in. So what I realized is that our allocations were a little bit higher than they should have been, and it put
mm.
a pinch and a stress on such a wonderful thing. You have all this increased cash flow, and then I'm stressed out because I'm overfunding my profit first account, and instead of celebrating, I'm getting all pissed off. So I did have to back that down because we maybe were a little bit overconfident in how much we could pull off.
Sure, sure. So the bottom line of that was it just took you a little bit longer to kind of settle in on that new practice
Yeah,
settle into what the actual dynamics of it were going to be, right?
exactly.
So it's interesting, but it should be obvious, but it's still interesting just how different each of those like locations can operate and the different dynamics involved with each of them. I mean, a lot of times, you read different things or even when you're hearing about them and people usually shortcut it. If we don't get into like a long form conversation about it, a lot of times people will shortcut it and it's almost like they make it almost sound sometimes like a rinse and repeat. Like I built this up and now I can go, this thing's working, that model's working, I can go do it over here and it's going to be kind of the same, but it's not ever like the same. It's like it's a bit different. So yeah, so understanding that and that there's always going to be different dynamics in different offices. That's pretty cool. So good thoughts and good takeaways there. Any other thoughts or things you can think of in terms of either profit first or so part of the pre-show, you'd mentioned that over time, I mean, profit first may have enhanced this as well, but maybe you had it before. Like over time, you've been able to really, and I think we hear it, grow to a way where you've been able to kind of take a step back. And one of my questions pre-show is, have you been able to take a step out of the business to design a lifestyle the way you wanted to live it? Like what kind of going into business with that intention to be the business owner and then seeing it come to fruition, like what kind of impact has that been had that you're able to give for your community or the people you work with, or like what kind of freedoms do you have a good story around that or a good
Yeah, I would say the
anecdote
freedom
around
part.
that?
I mean, one of my huge motivations in life is travel. My wife and I love to travel. The kids and I travel, and so what we essentially did, because we were able to peel off that profitability, we were able to set up a profit first travel fund.
Cool.
And by having that allocation, we look at the totality of what we want to do over the course of the year. And if we know that we can allocate this appropriately, it's changed how we can vacation. It's changed the number of
Yeah.
times we vacation, the time off that we can actually afford to take. And then we go in the beginning of the year and make our calendar out and think of some of these really cool trips. And when you have that allocation and the framework to do, it's amazing what you can do. And from a lifestyle standpoint, we're doing some really cool things with the family this year.
Nice. It's got
Yeah.
to feel great. Yeah. So, and I'm glad we went down that route and you brought that up because, some of our smaller doctors, sometimes I talk to them about, you got to get away, you got to take, I advocate for a quarterly vacation, but if you can't do that, or, on average, and if you can't do that, at least one or two, I mean, because, there's, as well as I do, there's not just doctors, but business owners across the country. You're like, haven't taken vacation in 5 years or 10 years, whatever it's been.
Yeah.
And so just being able to hear that, know that if you set the sights and follow the systems that you have, and we all try to do as growing a business as opposed to just a glorified job, that
Yeah.
that it is definitely possible, and you'll get there. So glad to see it come to fruition in your life too,
Thank
and
you.
that you can enjoy that time with your kids. So very good. Well, look, I want to respect your time. Thank you so much for joining us. This was a great conversation, and hope to bump into your path sometime in the future.
Yeah, me too. Thanks so much,
All
Eric.
right.
Thanks for
Yeah, you
having me.
bet.
All right. Cheers, man.